All right, everybody, let's do Mindhunter Season 1, Episode 7. Tench and Holden go to Oregon to speak with Brutus, and he comes in, and it's all about the persona for this guy. Obviously, he's talking about a fight with Ali and the idea of how it's very hard to break another man's jaw, and he doesn't even look at them when he comes in, and he's just very oppositional and off-putting. It's almost too apparent how he's trying to portray a certain image to them and act like a tough guy.
Our goal is to eventually publish a statistical analysis which will not include your name.
Thought this was gonna break the monotony.
Then as soon as Holden starts repeating the questions from the questionnaire that was provided by Wendy, Brutus starts to act like he's going to fall asleep and is instantly bored by this. And I think it's because he has experienced the traditional formatted types of interviews for so long. And that's what works in the educational realm and realms of study that Wendy's used to, but it might not be the best way of getting to what's going on with these criminals, which is what Holden has been used to doing. They start questioning him about the photos that he took and about his victims, and he's basically denying everything and saying that he was set up and that it's all a conspiracy. And instead of kind of going with the intuition that Holden usually has, which is to kind of play into whatever game they're going with and not be oppositional, they do other than that and start pressing him even more to admit that he killed these people and that he took these photos. And that basically just pushes them the other way and makes him decide that he's not going to talk to them and that he's going to call them morons and make them feel like fools. And I think this is a big mistake on their part, and something that they're going to rectify later on in the interviews with him.
Boy, oh boy. Kemper was right.
Kemper?
He said you guys were idiots.
After the interview, I just love this scene on the airplane where this very straight-laced man basically says, I can't let you guys sit in seats next to each other because this is my assigned seat. And so he's this guy that's very by the rules and by the book and can't go outside of his boundaries. And so then they decide to mess with him, where they pass photos of Brutus's victims side to side and talk about sex and perverts and all these things that he definitely doesn't want to hear, and it makes him so uncomfortable, and he wants to then change seats, but they say, no, it's okay, we're okay here. And it's a great way to mess with a guy who's so unaware of the world and is trying to keep himself inside of a little box.
Well, you don't have to talk about your family. You can make one up. It's just about building rapport. He asked for stuff. Cigarettes, pizza. Indulge him.
They go back to Wendy, and she kind of reminds them of what they need to be doing, which is building rapport with these individuals and playing into what they're asking for, as opposed to trying to do it however they think is best. And so she kind of brings the therapeutic model back into things, which Holden seemed to have forgotten, and they're going to utilize that when they go back to interview again. They go back to see Brutus, and Holden is willing to give him the cigarettes and start playing into the power dynamic, which obviously could be hard to do because you're saying, I'm going to let this serial killer kind of have an advantage over me. And so that's why we can understand Tench's resistance to this and how he really doesn't want to play into this game, because he understands there is a power shift going on, but he's so much more stuck in his ego than Holden, and Holden is seeing the bigger picture and why it's important to go about things in this way.
How do you explain the cross-dressing? Dad's a tranny? Dad's a fag?
Fuck you, man.
How does it fucking work with the shoes?
Holden's trying to work his way in methodically and slowly, but Tench is so impatient and unable to handle the tension, and he keeps pressing Brutus and pressing him, and then finally he says his nickname, which was revealed by his ex-wife over the phone, and this makes Bruto get up and want to leave. And we're just seeing how Tench is doing things very personally, kind of like that police officer from a couple episodes ago. He's unable to remove himself from what's going on and look at it more objectively like Holden does. But Holden is able to draw him back in and make sure that he knows that he can get the shoes he desires if he does talk to them. And we find that by them being able to give their power over for a few moments to Brutus, now they're able to have some power over him, in that he's now going to tell them details about his life and why he became interested in shoes and have a sexual feeling about them, and help their study. And so they need to be able to give up their own ego so as to help the bigger picture and their overall scheme of things.
One time my mom walked in on me jacking off. Came right into my bedroom. I hadn't locked the door.
Holden then reveals a personal detail about his life and his mom walking in on him while he was masturbating, and this just opens the conversation up even more. And so we see again how Holden is able to look past his own selfishness and his own image in trade for what he's doing and the purpose behind it. And Tench is just sitting there kind of grimacing and writing the notes, and he's like, what are we doing here? But Holden sees what's going on, and that's why he's able to take these chances and do what he's doing. Part of the problem with Tench in this interview and others is that he thinks he's different from these men. He thinks that he doesn't have anything in common with them. But when they talk about certain things like having your own private space,
It's tricky when you're married. You either have to deny yourself or keep a private space.
Like a golf course.
and how for Brutus that was his private space for his sinister things. And Tench says, oh yeah, like a golf course, he thinks that his private space is okay and that there's nothing wrong with it, but he's doing the same thing as this man. He's hiding his life from his wife. He's just doing it in a more quote-unquote acceptable way. And so this creates a problem for Tench because he can't identify with these men in any way. He thinks he's so different, and so that causes such a gulf between them and an inability to work with them on an effective level.
There's nothing wrong
If
with...
what we're doing doesn't get under your skin, you're either more screwed up than I thought, or you're kidding yourself.
And then we have a really interesting scene when Wendy listens to the transcript of the interview and she talks to Holden and Tench, and she gets pretty upset about what happened, specifically because they went outside of the interview criteria and kind of did things on their own. And so we're seeing that she's not happy that part of her power has been usurped here and that they're not following her directives, which is part of the reason that she decided to take this job. But then they start having an argument about cross-dressing and what cross-dressing means, and so it's starting to get into her own psychology a little bit because she is gay herself, and maybe she has some offense or some defenses about homosexuality and about some of the taboos or stigma that comes along with it. And so she starts to kind of tear them down a little bit. And then there's this interchange between her and Tench where she says,
How objective is that?
We have to use strategies.
I said use fake information as long as you establish rapport.
That's not what you said. And it's not possible.
and Tench is right here in that that's not what she said. She actually told them to use their own personal information and to talk about their families. And you see her look on her face. She's kind of trying to think back and remember if that was correct or not. And yeah, she's in the wrong here, and a lot of it is coming from her personal point of view, where she's getting offended that they're not listening to her, and that this is kind of hitting at some core aspects of her personality. Then Tench goes out to dinner with his wife Nancy, and she's talking to him about therapy for their son Brian and what they can do for him, and all the while he just has a glazed over look on his face. He's clapping for the musician, and he's eating his food in a very proper way, and it's almost like he's dead to everything, and he just wants to kind of zone out and go along with things as if nothing's happening. And it's like she's talking to a blank wall, essentially. But his problems are not going away, and when they get back to the house, the babysitter decides to quit because she found one of Tench's FBI photos of a dead body, and it's just, hey, this is going to continue, and you can't run from it, even though that's what he's going to continue doing in terms of burying himself in his work and continuing to drink and ignore what his wife wants to do.
I know that file cabinet has a lock. I just have to find the key. Or get a new one. That one's 20 years old.
And when Nancy tries to finally tell him that he needs to change how he interacts with Brian and do something different, he essentially shrugs it all off and starts complaining about his work and everything that he's involved in. And
You want to see that photo? I got it here somewhere. This one's interesting. A woman who was stabbed, raped, breast cut off. Turns out it was her boyfriend, his brother, and their sister. A little family affair.
even though he has a justified reason for saying these things, because his work is very difficult and it's very taxing, that is the excuse in this moment for why he's not closer to Brian. And that's not the real reason. The real reason is because of who he is and how he grew up and the type of environment he was in. And that's what's really preventing him. But he's going to put it on the work and use that as the excuse for why he's been the way he is.
You've been holding out on me.
Isn't that what nice girls do?
It worked. Marry me.
So I can cook for you? No.
And with this line, we get such a great introduction to this scene because it's setting the tone for what's going to happen at the end and kind of what's going on in the relationship between Holden and Debbie overall. There's this ongoing tension about Holden trying to find the good girl or the perfect girl that can live up to the standards of his mother, and Debbie trying to play into that role when she is really anything but. She's not that type of person, but she's trying to be for Holden. She's changing herself in some form or fashion. And Debbie ends up coming into the room in some lingerie and some heels, and we see how this reminds Holden not only of Brutus, but I think it also reminds him of sexual deviancy and the things that he's been studying in some of these serial killers. And he tries to act like it's something that he likes or that he loves, but obviously he can't get an erection. And then he says that this is not her, and I think what he's getting at here is that she's not being the person that he wants her to be. He wants her to be that good girl. He wants her to be that mom image. And with those high heels and the reminder of the sexual deviancy and what's different, this doesn't jive with that image, and he can't reconcile the two things. And so he's not able to allow Debbie to go this way and to be different. He needs her to stay within a certain boundary, which is what he is comfortable with in terms of relationships with women. And so that's the end for Mindhunter Season 1, Episode 7. Episode 8 coming up soon. Thank you for watching.